Indeed it is.
Get it figured out.
So different
Very well.
than a laptop.
All right, good evening, everyone. We will call to order our regular or unregular joint work session, Wednesday, April 8th, 2026 at 5:30 p.m. We'll move right into our agenda item number 2. This is our public comment. Mr. Alexander, do we have anyone here for public comment?
I don't see anybody here for public comment other than city staff and consultants, Mr. Mayor.
Very well. Thank you, sir. At this time, we'll move into agenda item number 3. These are items for individual consideration. 3.A, discussion and consideration of the financing structure of the proposed certificates of obligation series 2026, including sizing structure, optional redemption features, and related capital projects. Before we begin, first I would like to say what an honor it is. It's an honor to be the mayor of this wonderful city with this great council, but the real honor tonight is having our first ever in the city of Heath, as far as I know historically, to have a finance board, and not only just a finance board, a very astute group that I hold in very high regard. And not only are you guys tax-paying citizens, residents of this city, but you guys answered the call in a big way to step up and say, hey, whenever we started looking at the finances of the city and looking at a number of things, from ordinances to structure to leadership, but most importantly, finance and how the city's structured and how we plan things and how we can be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, how we can be good stewards of our utility side of the house. All of you guys really answer the call, and you have no idea, and I can't say it in words, how much I appreciate you. And I will tell you too, there's a lot of times people say, Mayor, what's some of the biggest accomplishments that you feel like you've had over the last 2 years? And it's been a lot. But I can tell you that I lead off by saying the finance board. Putting together the caliber of individuals to sit and volunteer on this board and help give oversight to this city and this council and make recommendations is something that I'm very, very appreciative of. So with that being said, I will hand it over to Mr. Alexander to kind of kick us off. What I'm going to do after we start is there's going to be a series of elements. We're going to do Q&A. It's going to be fairly structured. We want to make sure that we're cognizant of our time, everyone's time. There are going to be some slides that if you guys, if we're going too fast, feel free, speak up, say, hey, I got a quick question. That is the forum in which we're having. But we want to make sure that we're respectful of the overall time. Everybody good? All right, very well. Mr. Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Chairman, board members of the Finance Board. I've got a few slides that I kind of want to take us back in time a little bit, back to September when the budget was adopted, and kind of go through kind of how we arrived here at this point. So you may recall back in September, the City Council approved the annual budget for 25-26. That budget included a proposal to fund the water bridge plan under what we called Option 2. Option 2 broke down the overall cost of the water bridge plan into 2 phases. The first phase estimated at that time about $40.5 million. Second phase estimated at $21.5 million. The first phase included the 4 potable water wells, actually 3 potable water wells plus a portion of the first water well, so 4 potable water wells, a 1.5 million gallon elevated storage tank, and then a 3 million gallon ground storage tank that was to be shared between the city of Heath and the city of Rockwall. Phase 2 of the overall water bridge plan was $21.5 million. I had 2 potable water wells in it, wells 5 and 6, that were going to be in a future location at along Chris Cooney. and a 3 million gallon ground storage tank at Townsend that would be 100% ours. And that's how those phases were broken out in the budget proposal that was ultimately adopted by the City Council. Kind of fast forward, after a lot of work has been done on engineering and design work, as well as updating our probable cost estimates, I want to go through this. I know there's a lot of information. I'll try to break it down.
Before we do, Mr. Alexander, that was perfect tee up. One thing that I think it's important, and this council knows, but I think since it's our first joint session, making sure that everybody understands, number one, roles, number two, also understands how we got here, okay? I don't expect everybody to have listened to every single meeting that happened over the last 2 years. But first off, let's talk about roles, right? So as elected officials, we get the honor of receiving all kinds of opinions, and we're accountable to the public. And we have to do a very great balancing act of figuring out where the majority sits and make sure that we legislate on their behalf. As a board, you guys are here to give us guidance. You're here to give us recommendations. But I do want to make sure that you understand that the legislative body is ultimately in charge of the capital improvement plan. And it's the finance board's job to figure out, hey, is this a good idea on funding? What's the better structure? Do we elongate it? Do we shorten it? Or by golly, do we maybe just butt heads and go, maybe we should litigate it just for a minute? And that's where I see us today, is to say, let's talk about it. Let's litigate it a little bit, and let's really have some good dynamic dialogue, okay? But going back to when myself, Councilman Mormon, Councilman Dodson took office, this plan didn't exist. There were countless hours in a whole lot of meetings, public, private, engineers brought in, talking about what are the solutions, right? And it boiled down to, okay, you're going to buy water from Dallas, from Lake Ray Hubbard, and then do surface water and clean it? Are you going to keep taking water from Rockwall? Are you going to try to figure out how to take water from North Texas Municipal Water District? Or are you going to try to figure out how to create a new resource? Because that was the limits that you were pretty much within. It took a series of meetings just to get that narrowed down focus. The Ray Hubbard, not necessarily the greatest plan. Surface water, very, very expensive to clean. You might have to get rid of a park over there just to have a facility. You get into direct connection with North Texas Municipal Water District. Those of you that may remember, we were in litigation, so everything was black boxed, despite maybe what you read on Facebook. They didn't want to communicate with us. We didn't want to communicate with them when I got here, and ultimately it was lawyers that could talk. So we were able to get out of litigation, have some more direct dialogue. We then learned that North Texas Municipal Water District has a formula. They have a formula of what they believe should work for a municipality in receiving their water. We don't fit neatly in that because it's a per head, not a per acre. So ultimately, we are one of the highest per capita users within North Texas. Okay, so therefore, by not having multifamily, by not having smaller lots and things like that, you then create a concern, if you will, if that word works, for North Texas Municipal Water District. So we started saying, okay, let's talk to the provider that's been with us from day one, and the provider being Rockwall. They receive from North Texas Municipal Water District. They're one of, I believe, it was 12, might be 14 cities that essentially funded North Texas Municipal Water District and created that entity, and then they have a seat at the table for voting, and North Texas Municipal Water District is run and governed by those member cities. So ultimately, that just the better plan was to work with Rockwall because of all of that, and to even consider being a direct customer was not an ideal or actually didn't fundamentally work due to their formula. However, Rockwall was very accommodating and told us after litigation talks or resolution came to the table, they then said, we're okay with your per capita usage You guys just need to make sure that you're not a strain on our system. We've always tried to plan into your future build out, so maybe we can figure something out together. And that's where that conversation started maturing. And then there were secondary conversations between engineers on the potential bringing the source of well water into the system. We went back to North Texas Municipal Water District, verified on multiple occasions that was a viable solution. And so then we started saying, okay, let's develop a plan. I gave you the most condensed version I could. We're talking about thousands of hours of conversations, okay, and meetings. And so that's where this plan comes from. With that, Mr. Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on the far left of this chart, and this is also in your handout that I passed out to everybody, but on the left side of the chart is where we currently are on well number 1. So well number 1, overall cost is about $5.8 million. That includes design fees and construction costs currently underway and currently being funded out of existing city resources. So phase 2, which is really, phase 1 of the Water Bridge Plan, which is what we're really here to talk about. We have some updated probable cost estimates on these projects. Of course, we have design fees, which we are currently spending now for design. The water tanks are currently at 90% design. The water wells, and we have representatives from Garver and Kimberly Horn here to answer any questions you have on the status of these projects. But the water wells 2 through 4 are currently at 60% design. So probable cost estimates on the 3 water wells is at $22,170,000. I believe that includes a 10% contingency, so there is hopefully that'll come down a little bit as they finalize the design on those water wells. And the elevated storage tank, the 1.5 million gallon elevated storage tank, is currently estimated cost roughly $12.1 million in construction costs. So if you'll go down in that same middle column where it says phase 1, we also had, as you recall, we had about $4.5 million overall for the shared water tank with Rockwall, which included this $380,000 flow restrictor that we are expected to put in under our new water contract with the city of Rockwall. And the ground storage tank, we're estimating what the cost of that would be based on what we're estimating our ground storage water tank, our ground storage water tank is going to cost. So half of that is $3,651,000. And then recall that we were planning to reimburse ourselves about $1 million of water well number 1. So overall, for just construction costs, we're looking at about $38,297,000. If you add in, if we reimburse ourselves for design fees, we're for phase 1 of the Water Bridge Plan, we're looking at about $41,900,000.
And with that, take note of the flow restrictor valve, okay? So in the ability of receiving, and again, we'll give a little bit of history, right? So the city used to receive prior to roughly 2015, I think it was 3 million gallons a day. In 2015, 2016, it then switched to 5.5 million gallons a day, okay? So since about 2015, 2016, 5.5 million gallons a day was what we were able to receive from Rockwall. There was then in 2023, the infamous email that maybe many of you have heard about, is that we received an email that we could get an extra 500,000 gallons, but we didn't have a water supply agreement that was updated. We had an expired water supply agreement. We won't get into all of that. It's a whole nother ball of wax, okay? So with that being said, that flow restrictor valve was a caveat to receiving more water from them, okay? And so we'll get into that later on, but we just need to put a pin in that and say, okay, there is some flow rate restrictions that are required for us to have received, which now we have 6.5 million gallons a day that was put into place July of last year. We have a commitment from Rockwall that assumably we're not in drought concerns and or supply issue on their side, we will get an additional 500,000 gallons a day. So What was negotiated was over a 2-year time span, which really it's a 12-month cycle. In a 12-month cycle, we'll receive an additional 1 million gallons a day. However, we have to construct some restraint through a flow valve. Mr. Alexander?
And just to add on to that, that flow restrictor and vault, that will be that is being funded by us and controlled by the city of Rockwall. The idea being they're going to be able to control how much water we can take on any given day tied to our contract. And so we won't be able to overrun that, if we need to.
Just a quick question, why is it in phase 2 rather than phase 1?
It's in phase 1. It's at the bottom of
That's
phase.
still, all right.
And I just carried it over for the grand total.
I
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I thought about not including on grand total, but since it is grand total, I wanted to show the whole thing. So I know that may be a little confusing, but yeah, it is in phase 1. It is something that we are required to put in this year. But
And for a number, in 2022, although we are allotted the 6 million back in, well, it was 5.5 in 2022, we did receive over 7 million one time. So just so you know some historical perspective of our capabilities of pulling water and why some of those elements were part of this negotiation.
Is that likely to be the threshold for triggering the restriction? Or is that still under negotiation?
currently, we're at 6.5 million gallons a day. And so the flow restrictor at this point, if it were in place, would be set at 6.5 million gallons a day. Now, if things go like we plan, in the summertime, it'll be at 7 million gallons a day.
Yeah, this July, we stand to get another 500,000 gallons a day.
But it triggers at 7 million 1 gallons.
Yeah, but Mr. Creed has his finger on the trigger with regards to that whole piece, so.
So does that mean the water stops at that point, gets restricted to a slower rate?
So, if I may.
Yes,
the restrictor puts it at a flow rate to where if you operated it every minute of the day, you would end up at 7 million gallons.
So per minute, we're limited to what that would look like to 7 million. Perfect.
Yeah, I was letting everybody, all the technical
We were about
advisors
hard
actually
stop.
kicking in. So yes, hard stop at future state 7 million, but this is a regulator per minute. Okay.
Great questions, by the way, and we've got all the experts
Excellent.
here to help answer these questions today, so this is the time to ask them. So, okay, so moving on, just real quick, move on to phase 2, which is still hanging out there, right? The plan was to issue debt for phase 1 this year, start constructing those projects, get them under construction, and in the following year, late in the following year possibly, issue the second phase of bond funding to start on phase 2. That was kind of the original idea that we worked on during the summertime.
Well, actually, the original idea was all at once.
Yeah, fair
Due to
enough.
your advisory, we split it into 2.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hey,
Thank you, Mayor.
Steve, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Our initial pass at this on phase 1 and phase 2 had us coming in about 62 million all in.
Yes, sir.
And it looks like now we're about 70.3. Where did the extra 7.7 million come from?
Yeah, so I think we're seeing a higher cost on the water wells, Mayor Pro Tem. You see it's at 22.9, almost 23 million total, but the construction cost at 22.1, which is around 7.2 million. Tanner, help me, 7.3 million a well. And at the time we did the bond issue, the plan in the summertime, I think we were thinking around 6.3 per well, something like that.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So we'd be looking to bifurcate these 2 tranches of COs for these 2 pieces of work, correct?
You would have 2 different bond issues.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yep, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, now, with regards to the difference in the cost, some of what we're looking at is using existing resources to help cover that.
Right.
Right. And I'll get to that in a little bit as we get through the slides. Okay. Any questions on this slide? So we're still sitting about 22 million on overall cost for phase 2 and 41.9 million on let me see what I'm gonna do here. Yeah, 41.9 million on phase one total.
So to go back to your question, the big delta predominantly comes from this, the shared storage as well.
Yeah, I didn't see that
Okay, so
on our
that's a
initial.
4 million,
Yeah, our initial
that's a
take on
4
that.
million delta because at the time that we came up with the bridge plan, we were still in negotiations.
Right,
So we were still really working hard at what that was gonna look like.
Also bring your attention to, thank you, Jay. I'll bring your attention to that total 70 million does include the current projects of 5.8 million. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
okay,
On the left side. And so remember, we have absorbed the 322,000 in engineering fees because that happened summertime timeframe.
Right.
And we had already planned to absorb 4.5 million of water well number one
Yeah.
in our existing budget. We were only going to reimburse ourselves for about $1 million of that through the phase one of the bond issue.
right. Understood. Thanks, Steve.
Yep. Any other questions on this slide? Still going back, as a refresher, you recall that we hired Willdan, a consulting company, to come in and do a rate analysis for us as we contemplated not only the growing cost related to debt service on these bond issues, but also growing costs on the wastewater side. So wastewater side is a bit out of our control since the North Texas Municipal Water District is sending rates our way. And so that is a big part of our rate increases that we had planned year over year for the next 3 years, include that 3-year period, including this year. But you see the increase in the debt service happening at the top part of this chart, where in 26 we'd be bringing on phase 2 bond, and then in 27 seeing more of that come on, and then full freight of the 2 bond issues in 2028. And so that's really what's driving the rate increases that were proposed. And at the time, we all recall this slide where we had essentially 3 years of heavy lift on the rates, 24% for the first 2 years. On the water, 16% in the third year, tapers off after that. On the wastewater side, at least on the volumetric side, it kind of mirrors what's going on with the water, with 24% each year for the first 3 years and then tapering off after that. The base rate for the wastewater was only growing by 6%. It's not as big of an increase there. The base rate on the water, just so you know, just kind of clear up the distinction here, or make a distinction here. On the water side, the base rate and the volumetric rate were going up by the 24%, whereas on the wastewater side, the base rate was going up by 6% and the volumetric rate was going up by 24%. Okay.
Steve, will this rate plan cover the incremental increase in the project that we just previously discussed? Was this rate plan created before or after we did the contract with Rockwall for the shared storage tank?
Okay, so great question on how we're going to handle the shared ground storage tank. We had planned to put in the first phase of the bond issue $4.5 million for the shared tank, which included the flow restrictor.
Right.
And so that was baked into these rate increases, the debt service associated with that part of the bond in these rate increases. Now, it may come to pass, and likely will, that we may have a different financing mechanism through the city of Rockwall for that shared water tank, and we may have council consider removing that project from phase 1 at this point in time.
Okay.
Not necessarily the restrictor
Sure.
flow, which is a smaller piece of it,
Yep.
but the shared tank cost.
Understood. Thanks, Steve.
Steve, there was a time where there was gonna be 4 years of annual increases, and from best my memory serves, there was 2 at 24% and 2 at 25%. This slide here up on the wall is now 24, 24, 16, 3, 2. Is this the new?
Mr. Chairman, this was the final version of the rate study that was presented to council when they were adopting the budget.
I'm with you. So this isn't necessarily where we're at. We're still going through history.
We're still going through history, yeah. And Mr. Chairman, we haven't updated this rate structure yet. I mean, and likely won't do that until we get into the budget process.
Fair enough, and just for the benefit of us all, this is based off of phase 1 and phase 2?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
In North Texas Municipal, for the wastewater, that's our only option, right?
Correct,
They can charge whatever.
correct.
Okay.
Unless you build your own sewage facility.
That's right.
I don't know what that costs, but.
Well, just the operating expenses compared to the wastewater service, I mean, there's 2x compared to our one-time, increase, so it's kind of crazy.
Heavy lift over the next few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And to Councilmember Mormon's point, the option would be to build your own wastewater treatment facility, but we're already obligated for the debt they've issued for the Buffalo Creek Interceptor. Yeah. And this chart is kind of a reminder of what those rate adjustments we're going to look like on a utility bill for different customers using different amounts of water. So I think we highlighted the 15,000 gallons of water per month with 10,000 gallons of wastewater. You can see the increase in the bill is that middle row showing this year was expected to be about $46 a month more. Next year, being an additional $56 a month more, and then the year after that, an additional $55 more a month. And that is for water and wastewater combined. And so you're seeing the average is about a 19 to 20% increase. As far as the timeline for the projects, and I may have our consultants here help out a little bit on this, I wanted to provide at least we're looking at a few different scenarios on how these projects will play out. This particular scenario contemplates building well number 3, which is on Governor's first, and also building the elevated storage tank essentially the same time. So collectively, that's going to be around $20 million of projects. We expect to bid, under this scenario, we would bid and award well number 3 in this summertime, 2026, July-August timeframe, and start construction soon thereafter. As far as wells 2 through 4, this current slide shows bidding and awarding in late fall, early in the next year. We're talking to the consultants about moving that forward and actually bidding that sooner, understanding that you may end up with 2 separate contractors. You may have one contractor doing well number 3 and a separate contractor doing wells 2 and 4. Construction on those wells will be occurring over the next year. Right now, there is a thought that we could have our own ground storage water tank located on Townsend under construction in 2027. However, phase 1 of the bond issue does not contemplate borrowing that money yet. And so that particular project, as council desires, may get delayed into that phase 2 that we talked about during the budget process. Any questions on these timelines? I bring the timeline up more as an illustration as to you really don't want to start bidding and awarding projects unless you have the resources to contract for those projects. Okay. Mayor, are you ready for me to go into this particular slide?
Feel free.
Okay. I wanted to spend a little bit of time going through fund balances, and this is something that we haven't spent time with the finance board or the city council on, and so it's a little bit of a new exercise. But I wanted to talk through resources that we had at the end of this last fiscal year. If you look at our annual financial statements, you can go through and you can work these, track these numbers into the annual financial statements in that far left-hand column. And I want to talk a little bit about how resources for us will be used over this next year. So that first column shows $78.5 million. That is a tremendous amount of resources. But in the second column, we talk about what our targeted fund balances will be for the general fund and utility fund. In our current budget that has been adopted by council, we expect at the end of this year to have targeted fund balances totaling about $12 million. So as you take our current balance at the end of the year and back out what fund balances we want to have as targeted fund balance, that gets you down to about $66.5 million. And then internally we went through, okay, what other funds do we have that we would consider kind of non-discretionary, non-CIP funds, funding that's dedicated to a specific purpose that we track in a separate fund. For example, solid waste, not a lot of money left over in that particular fund, but it does go to solid waste function and providing services within our community for solid waste services. EDC funds are handled by the EDC, so you have HMBC, you have HEDC, you have close to $4 million of money that they manage, that board handles, that the city doesn't necessarily handle. Debt service money in our general obligation debt service fund, $861,000, goes toward debt service, for example. Over time, the city's accumulated money totaling about $1.5 million, $1.6 million toward the fire station building. So once the public safety buildings get done, what happens to that money? That's going to be ultimately up to the city council, but I could see that money being put into a capital improvement reserve for future major renovations or major improvements to those buildings later down the road, or other equipment purchases that may come up from time to time for public safety. You have park CIP money, which would be dedicated toward some park project, whether it be at Town Center Park, Terry Park, whatever the case may be. PATH money, which is donated funds that come in that are meant to be used for specific projects out in the Town Center Park. We have city's done a great job over the years setting aside money for capital equipment replacement, so you don't end up with spikes in your operating budget. So if you need patrol units each year, or you need trucks for public works, whatever the case may be, you have a reserve sitting there. So we have about $1 million for that purpose. And then it gets down into some smaller funds with regards to parkland dedication, tree mitigation, that would eventually go toward some kind of park project, something like that. And then public safety donations, fairly small, but it'll hit some kind of public safety project, whether it be training, whether it be equipment, whatever the case may be. And so when you take those funds out, then you end up with about $56,600,000 that you have available to go toward general projects, utility projects, things like that, based on which fund they're in. And so that, to me, becomes kind of the starting point for discussion as to how much money do we have to work with on the projects we've got going on right now, and what will we have at the end of the year. So as we transition over to the next slide, sorry for the size, it's in your packet if you want, if it's easier for you to look at on the slide in your packet. But starting with that $56 million, what do we have going on right now, and how is this going to play out using this money? And so we know water well number 1 is going to come out of this money. So that's $5.5 million. We know Hubbard Drive is going to come out of this money. That's $5.5 million. Those two projects are under construction. We're spending money now toward, and it's going against the money that we have in our fund balances for that purpose. Design for the water bridge plan. We talked about the design for the water wells 2 through 4 and the ground storage tank, 3 million gallon ground storage tank, the 1.5 million gallon elevated storage tank. Got about 2.3, I think, million. My eyes are getting worse, I guess, but 2.3 million associated with that. That's going to come out of that money. We have Town Center Park. We have about $6.5 million. At the start of this year, we had about $6.5 million remaining in encumbered funds on that contract that would get spent out of that money. We have Candlelight Fire Flow of $1.5 million that's going to come out of that money. We have design for additional fire flow project. The council has asked us to move forward in the project list and start getting that design now. That's $565,000. That'll come out of that money. When we started the year, Meadowview was still under construction. We had an encumbrance of about $565,000 that was going to be spent out of that money. We'll have some furniture for Public Works building. We're currently making some improvements to City Hall that were already planned for in the prior year budget. We have $1.7 million in street maintenance money that we spent this year. It was basically 2 years at one time that we worked through this year. Spent about close to $1.8 million on that. We bought a ladder truck for $1.7 million that's going to come out of that money. And then I tried to kind of anticipate some money that's going to come back into these funds to kind of we know we're going to have transfers over into these funds for whether it be for impact fees we collect or just operating transfer out of current resources, and we'll have some interest earnings that we know throughout the year. But we expect to run through about $40 million or so of that $56 million and end up with about $17 million left over at the end of the year. And you can see the buckets that they're in. Some of the first two are operating budgets, which you have $1.3 million or so that we anticipate in the general fund that you could apply toward a street project. You have $6.8 million or $6.5 million in the utility fund. You could apply toward utility type projects. We have $7.4 million in our capital improvement reserve, which you'd think would, since it is a general capital improvement reserve, would go toward street projects, bridge projects, maybe even some drainage projects, things like that. And then a few other, about another $1.6 million or so coming out of our utility CIP, and then the 2023 CO bond, which would need to be spent in accordance with those bond issues. And at the bottom, I put on a list on, and this wasn't this is not an exhaustive list, but it's a list of things that are kind of known in the environment to us, of things that council has talked about and will be contemplating as far as planning in the next year's budget. Larry Drive reconstruction, Key Drive reconstruction, Kaiser Springs Road, that's on our CIP list. Something needs to be done with that. We need to spend some funding on studying our infrastructure and determining what projects are we not thinking of that are out there that we're responsible for taking care of and making sure that it get replaced in a timely fashion. We haven't done those studies, and so we do need to spend some money on studying our infrastructure, our future infrastructure needs, things of that nature. Painting the water tank. I've heard a little bit since I've been here, heard about this water tank right near City Hall. It hasn't been repainted in years, needs to be repainted. That's not on our list right now as far as needing to get done. We have impact fee studies we need to update. Terry Lane Trail, council has requested that we build and complete a portion of the Terry Lane Trail from at least Meadowview down to Terry Park. We expect that project to be $1 million project, albeit we might get about $500,000 of it from the county to help fund that. Fire flow improvements remaining, which council's wanting us to move forward on designing. It's the estimate that I saw was $4.9 million to do those projects. And so my point is, through this illustration, is these are projects that we could just run through real quick on a list that we haven't sat down with council and spent a lot of time vetting out. And I have to believe that we're going to find more projects out there that we haven't even contemplated yet. That I think this $17 million would be planned out and prioritized to be used toward.
Steve, if I may, I'd like to let you finish getting through the history, but this particular slide is probably the right place to do this. If you put a swag to the value of that list that's just on the contemplation list, has there been any sort of guesstimate or swag to quantify the estimated value of those?
Sure. I mean, as I mentioned a second ago, fire flow improvements, we got $4.9 million is the estimate for that. Terry Trail, we're looking at about $1 million. I suspect the estimate we got from an engineer, Brian, if you can help me recall, you had SPI develop a quick estimate on that, 1.3 maybe, 1 million. Any of the road reconstruction projects, I think you could put $1 million price tag on pretty quick. Key Drive is a road that needs to be a reconstruct. Larry Drive is a road that's a reconstruct, and those are going to be expensive roads. 9 to 10 million.
Fair enough. I think most in the room probably know, but just for the benefit of those that don't, there's obviously a difference between our general fund and our utility fund, right? And the necessity of maintaining a certain measure of respective fund balance to maintain our AA ratings in excess of saying that we have, right? And so it's not a big deal that it's not pointed out on this, but out of the 17 and change that's up there, if you pull just the focal point being on the general fund, and then you took an estimated, I don't want to put words in Mayor Council's mouth, but let's just say that the target number was 30%, okay, 30, 35. I think it needs to be at a minimum of 25, but let's just call it 30 for the spirit of this conversation.
Those up there are 35%, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So these are 35.
The ones that are on this slide here, the fund balance target, those are 35%. Probably on the prior page.
Yeah. But of the 17, but the next page of 17 is the real number.
Well, 17 is the balance we expect to have left at the end of the year.
After you put your committed, known commitments in. Yes, so that's the real number we're talking about.
Yes,
and of that 17, a portion of that is general fund, a portion of it is utility fund.
Yes, sir.
Of what's presented, the top two numbers on the right are what? That's utility fund and
yes,
general fund.
Yeah, the first one is general fund, the second one is utility fund, yes, sir.
Right, okay. And so then it's kind of some for one, some for the others as you keep going down the list below that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so at 35%, that target number to be needed is what for
the general fund, we were looking at 4.4 million. For the utility fund, is 7.5 million.
Okay, 4.4 and you've only got 1.3.
Above that. It's 1.3
In
above that.
excess.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? And so, just in the spirit of a little bit of history, and I'll say kind of the finance boards for, after your presentation, I think it's very worthy of noting at this stage, and we'll talk about it a little bit, you're not gonna hear a bunch of reservation of the amount of money that's being needed for respective projects. It's not in our purview to talk about the particular projects. There's no shortage of hot sports opinions about the projects, but that's not in our purview for our projects, okay? But it's been expressed as a concern from this group from the word go that 100% of what's being considered, either it be in phase 1 and or phase 2 or however many different chances that it were to be taken in, is exclusive to all things water bridge plan, right? You've got an undetermined amount of projects here that are immediately known before you even get through your current budget cycle coming forward.
Right.
And that's continued to be an expressed concern. There's far more needs than just all things water. Let's see. All right. Go ahead.
I think that might have been my last slide.
Hey, Steve, I do have a quick
Perfect
question on
timing.
something else.
Yes, sir.
You had mentioned, which page was that? That there are funds in HEDC and HMBC that are managed by those groups? Are
Yes,
they managed according to PFIA?
That's a great point of clarification. So we actually manage the investment of the money.
Okay,
What I meant to say,
okay, I got you.
I'm sorry. What I
They
meant to-
manage the budget.
They manage the
Okay.
budget, yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
We do have, Mr. Mayor, Jim Simonis here to go through the plan of finance for this, for the phase 1 of the bond issue, if you're ready for him to discuss that.
I don't think so, not at this time. To address the chairman's lead-in, I believe where you're, what I feel you're wanting to take the conversation to is, hey, look, we hear that you need all this money, we hear you got a whole lot of things that we've got to get accomplished, we hear that really we don't have a ton of money that's not encumbered, but, right? And then we start looking at, okay, well, let's understand water. So let's start there. And again, as we start thinking about water, I told you what happened in 2022, that we utilized over 7 million gallons in one day. And some might say, well, are we really trying to solve a problem? I'm going to start really macro and then I'm going to get micro. Are we trying to solve problems for today? Some might say, Mayor, really, this is long-term debt, man. We've got to be really mindful of what we're trying to accomplish. Well, the next question I would then tee up is to say to this council is, when do we believe that we're going to reach full build-out? Because as we are the elected body, we have to sit here and say, we have to plan. Right, we have to plan accordingly for the greater good of the community and say, where's the finish line? Well, so then we lean on our advisors, we lean on engineers, we lean on our comprehensive plan studies, and the academic number that's been given is, hey, you're going to reach build out in 2038. We don't know if that's really going to be the timeline. But ultimately, you're saying that you believe your finish line at future build out for the city is that you're going to be looking at 10, 12, maybe push it out some and say 15 years. Okay, so everything that we're doing here today, I hope that we're all taking the exercise very seriously is that really we are here to try to solve the problem through future build out. If we were at the very beginning of the first mayor that came in, we might not have been here doing that. In 1980, they had 1,500 people that lived here. Okay, as we sit today, we have 11,000 people that live here. We've seen some major growth really over the last 10 years. So we know that we've had access to 5.5 million gallons a day, roughly, for the last 10, 11 years-ish. So do we want, as we sit here today, we have a seat at the table to solve the problem. We already know where we believe the finish line to be. So we've got to look at this and go, are we trying to solve the next 5 years? Are we trying to solve the next 15 years? And I would say that my job is to look ahead, and so are this council, to say we've got to solve the problem for 15 years. Now, you might come back and say, yeah, but do we need to fund it over the next 2 years to solve a problem over the next 15? Okay, now we'll get into a different, more micro style conversation, and we'll talk about things like rate compression. I heard Mr. Shaw state, wow, man, look at the rate increase versus the utilization for the interceptor line from North Texas Municipal Water District. That's all you got for your sewer. Well, right now, that's all you got for your water. So you're 100% reliant on Rockwall, which they mark up their member rate to then sell you the water. You don't have direct access. You're not a member city. You don't even fit really well into their formula, so you probably don't even want to be. So when you look at that, you go, how in the world are we going to be able to manage as their rates increase? Because as they go and build more infrastructure, no different than that interceptor line. You may be only taking up 6% utilization, and they're building this line, and they've got 3 cities to pick up the tab. Where's the growth at? Might be at the end of the line. Okay, but again, you're now talking about shared resources. So as they increase their rates, how are you going to ever compress the rate if you don't provide resources? And if you don't have a surplus, how are you ever going to stop what is called I've lost it. It's your take or pay. So essentially, North Texas Municipal Water District mandates to their members that they have a take or pay system, meaning that, hey, whatever was the highest amount that you took on an annual basis, that's what you're going to pay for into the perpetuity of your supply agreement. So right now, if we have taken 950 million gallons, and then next year you take over 1 billion gallons, what are you going to do? You're going to continue to take more water, so you're going to continue to have that number. The faster you can get your resources online to actually bring water into your system and stop being 100% reliant on your current provider, you can stop your take or pay at some point.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you got that down to 800 million recently, is that right?
That's do we know, Mr. Creed, what the new negotiated number was? I know that in negotiations it was prior year, which would have been 2024.
So that is the negotiation of the new contract. I don't know
What the actual
the MOU has it at 945.
945. Okay. So we just need to iron that out. But yes, I do believe that there was compression on that because we were able to do a look back because I believe we had a delta of 100 million gallons. So I can get that answer for you.
The demographer study that rolled out the 2038, whatever, 12 to 15 year build out. If you're at 11,000 people now, what is the estimated total to be at build out?
16.5. In the comprehensive plan, I think it's. In the comprehensive plan that was approved last summer, I think it was around 16,500 build out in 2038.
And if you really want to go back historically, in 2014, during those water utilization studies for future build out, they were predicting that we would need 19 million gallons a day. So we've created some compression just in the way that we're doing our management of the comprehensive plan and city ordinances. Yes, Chairman.
Estimated rooftop count, we've got about 4,000, 4,200?
4,200.
Okay.
Ish.
Pretty good swag for me. Got close, that's good. And to get the remaining additional 5,500 folks, are we using 2 per? In other words, what's the additional number of rooftops that we're talking about?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, okay, fair enough.
I can
If it's about 2.5 per now,
Yes.
a rough high level here at 11,000 on 4,200, we got 5,500 to go if we use the same deal. So I'm again, not we'll go through this in whatever particular order Mayor desires to go in. But just strictly from a linear scale, it seems to me like the amount of water that, the quantity of wells being considered here, it's simple to use 1 million gallons a day for math. I realize that there's certain parameters that may make it 700 to 800,000. So take whatever percentage of 1 million gallons a day we're talking about, up to 6 million gallons a day-ish that new wells could bring on here. Who knows what our take or pay may be at by the time that we get to this. I suspect that it's gonna be somewhere in the 10 to 12 million, annualized, 12, what is it now? It's right at 1 billion. So, you know, whatever, maybe it's 1.2, whatever, 20%, whatever. It seems like, and again, receive this the right way, not in the form of a challenge to where it came up with. It seems as though we're out producing far more than what is needed based on what we're using today and only increasing by 5,500. I don't know that it's as simple of a linear equation to sit here and divide, 11,000, because clearly the majority of the consumption is used with irrigation, right? And generally speaking, through recent changes and expansions of the comp plan, it's as though we're even increasing lot sizes more so than decreasing lot sizes, which is only going to deviate that linear usage, right? But if we're using 6 million, or if 6 to 7 is the number now, and we're adding it by 50%, using strictly rough and round numbers here, we're talking about 9 to 9.5 million. And if we took this out to fruition and had all 6 online, it sounds like that at least part of the current council's consideration here is the need to radically reduce what we're taking from North Texas Municipal Water via Rockwall here, with the theory that it's less expensive using your own well-generated water. Is that a fair assumption? Is that?
I would say it's a small piece, but yes, very much part of the conversation. Okay, so to go really broad and try to bring it tight, right? So one thing that I'm going to start kind of at a touchy-feely, right? So as elected officials, and you're well aware of this, Mr. Chairman, is that when you're elected, you get the opportunity to hear all the voices as often as they want to make sure that you're aware of. And anytime that you go into a stage 2 restriction, I think that you for sure can understand the pressure and the reminder of what they brought you here to solve. So I'm going to start with that to say, all right, so what does stage 2, how does that get triggered? Well, when we talk about 6 million gallons, are we really talking about 6 million gallons? No, because policy states, and the way that we try to govern is not to run it to 6 million and then go, uh-oh, right? So ultimately, we start really hyper managing aggressively when we hit 90% of that utilization. And that means 24/7, nonstop management, lots of communication, all hands on deck. That also then goes into how do we currently manage something that's been fairly unique for our city and not really well received is water violations. This last year was the highest on record at 1,200 water violation citations. Okay, and out of that 1,200 citations, you can only imagine how much people really appreciate being cited when they look at you as a water provider, right? No different than my cable provider. Don't tell me I can't stay on Netflix 24 hours a day. No different than don't tell me that I can't water my lawn and I gotta only do it in these certain hours, okay? So we can talk about municipal government, but we can also talk about free enterprise system and what people's expectations are. So as elected body, that's the value of that information. How we increased those citations as we were trying to manage and conserve and teach and try to work in the greater good, those citations were predominantly getting done because we hired or had to hire code enforcement at night. Because our primary utilization or peak utilization actually happens from 6 a.m. in the middle of the night. Or, I'm sorry, from, 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. Okay? And so we've got to ask ourselves, what type of city do people expect when they move here? When they buy or build in the current state, now our average home values are 200 to 250,000, or I'm sorry, 700 to 750,000 in value. New homes that are being built are ranging from 1.5 million up to 3, 4, 5. We had one home just recently sold 8 million. So what are their expectations? I can tell you, my phone rings. Their expectations are not that there's a Gestapo sitting out in front of their house in the middle of the night. So I led with the touchy-feely. Now we'll get into some more itemized things. Our role and our responsibility is to think about sustainability. So I have a generator on my home. I have a generator on my home because electricity went out in Snowmageddon, and I said, hey, that's not going to happen to us. I want to make sure that I have electricity at all times. Okay? We as a city, I have to look at water and say the same thing. If something were to happen to North Texas Municipal Water District, your only water source provider, what would you do? As a city, it would be shut down. A basic thing of flushing your toilet, you will not be able to do. You might say to yourself, yeah, Mayor, but how often does that happen? Well, I can tell you that North Texas Municipal Water District in 2018 had a water main break. It ruptured a 72-inch pipe, triggering an entire region conservation emergency strategy. I can also tell you that you can look at cities like Jackson, Mississippi in 2022, where they had a system collapse and 150,000 residents did not have running water for over 3 weeks. I can tell you that in Houston, Texas, they had failures that put 2.2 million residents that had to go to a boil water notice for almost a week. I can tell you that in Atlanta, Georgia, they have ongoing state of an emergency due to a lack of infrastructure, expenditures, and major breakages. I can tell you that we are now in the modern age of cyber attacks. I can tell you that not only has North Texas Municipal Water District, but the city of Oldsmar, Florida, Arkansas City, Kansas, and a number of other cities have had actual cyber attacks. Most of those happening to their billing systems. However, one of the cities was attacked, and that actually interrupted their SCADA system and had to go to a manual water operating system during that time. So, in saying that, then I'll get a little bit more granular and say, let's talk about Heath. Let's talk about our main line. We have one main line that comes off the take point over at Shenanigans. That main line, as I'm to understand it, is roughly 20 years old. Lifespan, highly debated, 30 to 40 year lifespan. If you have a breakage right now, you are going to be reliant on what's in the system until you can get it repaired. We also saw the same or similar thing happen whenever we had a 300 horsepower pump go down at that take point. It took our overall capacity of what we were able to receive down by 1.4 million gallons a day. For those of you that lived through it, there was a whole lot of really upset people in a packed out city hall. So when we're trying to solve these problems, we're trying to solve them for a number of reasons, right? Whether it be rate compression, whether it be take or pay, whether it be sustainability. To me, I would say it'd be pretty nice to have a city that completely is self-sustaining if there were a catastrophe. Whether it be to our main line, whether it be to the take point from Rockwall, or it be North Texas Municipal Water Districts, or a disruption within their system. So this would allow us the ability to be that sustainable city. As I look at this city, and we all tout it as we're a premier we're a premier outdoor lifestyle community. We're a lakeside community, right? And when people move here, they expect that they have water. And if we know that we've got a 15-year look ahead to a finish line, we really are able to go, hey, we might be in our third or fourth quarter of really getting all the infrastructure in alignment to what it needs to be and prepared appropriately. So I can go into deeper details on 6 million versus 7 million and what days peaked, and I can talk about, or I can have an expert talk about flow rates and refill values. If you think about the days that you hit your max capacities, and you have done it on a number of occasions over the last 3 years. I just talked about in 2022 where you actually received more than what you're even allowed to receive. And what happens to your storages if you hit those capacity loads? Well, those storage facilities, they can save you for 24, 48, maybe 3, 4, or 5 days. But at some point, they're not bringing you a resource. Okay? And if you don't have enough water to refill, then they're sitting half full anyways. So we've got to be mindful about bringing on resource and bringing on storage. And so those are some of my concerns. And I say I believe that is the will of the council. However, I wanted to speak independently to that. We have a growth rate that we need to adjust for. We need to make sure that we're thinking ahead. And hopefully that answers some of your questions. If you have any others, please ask.
Mr. Mayor, I think that as the chairman had mentioned on the outset, I think the purpose of this session is not to debate the strategy, but to talk about funding the strategy in the most appropriate way. So I'd like us to move towards that if we can at this point.
Yeah, very much so, and I appreciate that. Ultimately, I just feel it's important that you guys understand how we view it. And so when we talk about the sense of urgency of needing to solve it and funding it, right, because funding is solving it. We can have as many plans on paper as we want, but funding it is the mechanism. So I thought it to be good to be colorful in describing all of the concerns.
Thank you. Can I have a question? And thank you for scaring me like that. I'm going to move now. Am I reading this right? We're going to get 7 million gallons for all the storage when we finish all the storage tanks?
By this summer, yeah.
Is that the total? I'm just trying to get that straight.
Brian, what's the total storage?
So currently, right now, we have 2 million in elevated. We would add another 1.5 in elevated. We have 3 million in ground storage. So currently we have 4.5. If you added the ground storage tank,
Yeah.
that would take you to 7.
Right. Okay. So that was my question.
It would take you to 7 point. It would take you to 6 million ground storage. This is pre-pump. So forgive me, but that's a little bit. You don't have that in-house ready to go. It's got to be sent to the system.
Yeah.
You would have
Sure.
3.5 million in elevated.
Okay.
So if we lost a transmission line, you'd have 3.5 million.
Okay.
Quick question. What's the flow rate on the first 4 wells after they're up and running? Do we know? Or guess?
We have current flow rate on what I would say our first well being a success. Do you want to speak to that?
I'll let the engineer speak to it. I know that they had I guess a certified number that they put forward.
Yes, absolutely. So we had our 36-hour pump test a couple of weeks ago, and we got the results back from that, and it came in at just over 1 million gallons per day.
So we expect 4 million per day on 4 wells, or that's just
Assumably.
no way of knowing?
Assumably.
Okay.
That is what we're designing them towards, yes.
And to answer your question, on the overall storage, you have 5 million right now. To this plan, phase 1, phase 2, all in, you'll have over 10 million gallons in storage.
That's my question.
Do we expect the water wells to always produce 1 million gallons a day?
We had a groundwater feasibility study that looked forward for the next 30 years, and that's what that study showed.
Okay, good, thank you.
Until you put a data center here, but yeah. Sorry.
Such a sensitive subject.
Yeah, I know.
That's assuming the data center.
I was thinking out loud, wasn't I?
That's assuming the data center drills a well versus working with North Texas Municipal Water District, which would be their first play.
So, Mayor, I have one question.
Please do.
we won't have to ration water anymore, will we? Because I'm tired of my wife jumping my butt every single summer.
You should always conserve water, sir.
That was a good political response, I like that.
Well, I think as long as we're receiving water from the North Texas Municipal Water District through Rockwall, we will always have conservation guidelines and rules we'll need to follow.
Are you gonna go, is there more of the history and all that, or?
No, we would then get into Jim Sabonis talking about bond stuff, so that's why I wanted to make sure that we have a robust Q&A.
Would you like me to attempt to give a perspective? Go ahead.
Just one last question. As we build out the wells and we get up to $4 million gallons a day, would we reduce our reliance on Rockwall at that point with the North Texas Water District, and reduce that take or pay number once we have 4 million running online? And would there be a savings that we could use to offset some of the cost?
Yeah, I'll let the experts speak to that, but in general, yes. The idea is that you're then bringing on a resource, right? So you have debt to service, but after that debt is serviced, now your rate is dramatically decreased. So depending on utilization, that's the only way that you're going to start to see rate reduction, right? We do know, historically speaking, North Texas Municipal Water District's never gone down on rates, right? They've only gone up on rates, right? So the only way to create some compression in their rate increases is to bring new resources online and therefore becoming less reliant on it. But we already know, and this is a little bit of what we're not talking about, but at 7 million gallons, you can't have the build out that you're talking about having within the city at 7 million. Yes, we believe that we can have 9 million coming from Rockwall over the next 5 years. However, that's contingent on Blackland water coming off that take point. It's also contingent on RCH coming off the take point, but we're very confident that that is happening. You know?
John, there should be a pro rata reduction for a period of time, but when your population gets to a certain point, that pro rata reduction is reduced, right? So at some point in the future, those two lines intersect.
Was there a study done that ultimately compares the cost 10 to the cost of bringing your own source?
As far as studying different water sources, is that what you're asking? There was, before I got here, I think there was
$7 million per versus cost plus 10. The obvious is $1 billion years from now, when you're self-sufficient and you're not having to buy anymore, then the cost is compressed, obviously. But
sure.
What did the studies show as to how long it takes for that break even to happen?
Yeah, I don't think an external study was done to that extent. We did some internal work, you may recall, where we built out a model that attempted to anticipate our growth, where we got up to that 16,200 people, which we estimated, just so you know, 6,600 accounts, rooftops. And at that point in time, when we reached build out, we were anticipating needing about 10.2 million gallons a day. At 90%, after you get the wells put in, after you get your water from another water supplier, as we had contemplated, get to the 9 million from Rockwall, we'd be at 15.5 million gallons a day. At 90%, that's 13.95 million gallons a day. So you have a little bit of a surplus, about 4 million gallons, not quite 4 million gallons a day surplus in excess water to protect yourself. And then we looked at if we were able to moderate I wish I could show this up here, but if we could moderate the take or pay to 984 million gallons a year over time, considering the debt service we're going to have to pay, I think we end up seeing our rate that we're paying, our cost per 1,000 gallons, going from 92.80 per 1,000 now to down to 594 after in 2050 is what we were looking at. But it doesn't necessarily get your answer is a break-even point. I mean, you start seeing a reduction in your cost per gallons pretty immediately when you start.
Certainly not trying to take it down a rabbit trail. If the study doesn't exist, or the plan doesn't exist, it totally doesn't have any relevance to being sole provider and all the other positions that the mayor was suggesting. It also, it's just strictly from a financial side. I'm gonna just, if I may, I echo what Mayor Pro Tem suggested earlier, that our purview never once, and just for the benefit of everybody that's listening, we've spent, outside of our first meeting, less than 2% of our time even talking about the details of the water bridge plan. We know where we sit. It doesn't matter what our opinions are. It's not in our purview, okay? And so I know the mayor knows this because we've had plenty of discussions about it. But for all the others, we don't sit here and have a great time over 2-3 hour meetings talking about and complaining about what's been brought in front of us. So respectively and respectfully, I watched the meeting that ultimately resulted in us being brought together to discuss what I would constitute as reservations or differences of opinions from this board versus the council as it relates to moving to the next steps, ultimately to fruition of these CO bonds. And I think we should talk about that.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
that's all that, his presentation, the bond's moving as fast as oil's changing every day because we're in the middle of a war, okay? His model that he showed us 2 weeks ago versus running one today are gonna look different, right? I don't think that, and I definitely think that's part of our discussion, but your meeting, I'm just trying to help.
Yeah, so in general, I think foundation is important, right?
Yeah.
Because we have not all come together, number
Yeah.
one. Number two is the recommendation was basically 15 million, right? And our concern is that doesn't fund what we believe is necessary, and it does kind of fly in the face of phase one of the request. So I felt like it important to actually go through all of that foundational pieces, so then we can get into the nuts and bolts.
I agree and support it.
Very well. Okay,
Do you want
Yeah.
him to make a presentation?
Steve?
Yes, sir. Jim, you want to go through your slide?
Good evening, Mayor, council members, finance board members, it's good to be here. Seems weekly habit nowadays, you know.
Important issue.
The numbers that we've seen, I've done this presentation, I guess, 4 or 5 times. Steve had a couple components, and I'm actually going to focus on the components that really I think are matter to you. And what we started with is a one-phase, $40.5 million funding, using this self-supported certificate obligation, allows you to use your AA+ rating to get the lowest interest rates. We do a 20-year amortization to fit well within your cash flow of your program. Interest rates have gone up, they've come back significantly in the last 2 days, but I think the decision here was about one phase or 2 phases, and if you do one phase, how much you're going to do. So what we've done is, based on direction from Jay and Steve, we've prepared 3 scenarios here. Scenario 1 is the standards scenario that we were talking about. It involves funding $41 million of bonds, paying cost of issuance, and underwriter's discount, and end up with their $40.5 million project fund. When we ran this last week, we had a 4.52% interest rate on a 20-year transaction. Total principal and interest is a little over $65 million. Average annual about $3.1 million. If you look at your existing P&I and you look at the new P&I, it actually would be an increase of about $2.2 million per year. Now, 1B is a comparable scenario. It funds the same $40.5 million of projects, but it does it in 2 phases. As I indicated earlier, that we do one phase in the next issue next month, close after approved by Attorney General. Then a year from now, we do the second phase. And so everything is pretty much the same. And the one thing I wanted to point out are a couple key components here. That one is that when you look at the cost difference, the actual out-of-pocket cost for bond rating, legal fees, financial advisor fee, the cost to actually put this, attorney general review it, doing it 2 phases versus 1 phase. This is a considerably high number. Would end up costing about $162,000 more. So just by doing 2 issues, there's a number of costs that are not redundant, and that would be about $162,000 more. So we're looking, and that includes both cost issues and fees and underwriter's discount. That's one thing to take into consideration. From a debt service, we ran these at the same interest rate, because I didn't want to make a guess interest rate to prepare one scenario, another scenario. It's hard to project what will happen. But what we did do was actually do a slightly different structure. We actually ended up with the scenario in 2 phases having lower debt service. And what we did was, if we issue this transaction this year, we have a 20-year amortization. We do phase 1 on the project right in here. You'll see that this phase 1 and matches up the same timing. And we do a year from now, we do the second phase. We only go 19 years. So conceptually, both transactions have the same actual amortization, but the second one has just slightly shorter average life of the bonds. So what takes place is that on that transaction, you see the total P&I is slightly less, 65.3 million, and the annual is about $20,000 less. And that's due to us having a short year on that second one. So actually amortizing, we compare that very similar. So the net result would be that when we look at that and add it up to existing debt, going 2 phases with the assumption that interest rates are the same, even though you pay higher costs, and having 1 year shorter amortization, your average is about $10,000 this year. And so the point, when I get out of this, and it was interesting when we were talking about how to present this, it really comes down to interest rates today versus interest rates a year from now. Take that into consideration, because they actually will be pretty similar if interest rates are the same. The difference will come into play if you're what the interest rates are. If you look at interest rates today, and we've talked about micro changes since the Iran conflict began. Interest rates have gone up significantly. To give you a feel, on February 27th till today, we've seen about a spike up about 43 basis points. It actually peaked at about 66 basis points up. It came down the last 2 days and is trending downward. So at the same time, when you look at the grand scheme of things, interest rates are near historical highs. We look at our bond buyer index, say where we have it at. We're at, we took our index, we compared it to the weekly indexes over the last 20 years. We're actually higher than 95% of the time. At the same time, generally, we have people here that are involved in the market, as traders and active investors. There's a general feel that we have peaked a little bit in interest rates, but there's also contrary factors involved. And one is that the lows that we saw 4 or 5 years ago, when the rates hit historical highs, generally our industry doesn't believe they'll ever come back because of the amount of federal debt that's outstanding right now and the competition for funding. So, to me, what it comes down to is not to play an interest rate guessing game. Go back to what I was taught 30 years ago, that you fund something when you need money, and then you fund it. But
Jim, question for you and Steve maybe right now. In the current state legislative environment, we have the ability to approve and issue bonds. However, one of the things that's being discussed in the 90th legislative agenda coming up, and one of Lieutenant Governor Patrick's charges, which means one of Governor Abbott's charges, is to rate limit the amount of debt that a city can go out and procure without a 2/3 majority vote and approval by the citizenry. So that I think is probably worth a little bit of discussion, because there seems to be a lot of energy around that. And while we need water for sure, I think every time that you bring some of these things to a municipal vote, it's a crapshoot.
Well, I'll follow up on that, and I'm glad, you mentioned that. And during the last legislative session, there were a variety of initiatives and proposed legislative bills that would have limited various ways that cities fund their projects, whether limiting what they can do in certificates of obligation, how they can do general obligation bonds. What happens if a general obligation bond would have failed, how often you go back and do that again. And those have actually, some of those things have taken place over the last few years. We have to give longer notices now, we're restricted, and some things that we're able to fund, the Attorney General is now administratively not allowing that issue. And I do think it's a real, I think cities that are overall are under attack by our state legislature, both in funding caps, variety of things that are taking place. So I do think that's going to be something, and I understand we're going to face. Cities will have difficulty with raising revenues going forward, and the ability to actually that. I tell a story. I went to visit my senator last session, and I actually was talking about some bills that we proposed that actually limited cities' ability to deal with people that could leave and deep from the city limits, go ETJ, come out of their CCM. And it made me smile because he said, that's not something I'm interested in discussing. I'm interested in how can we stop people from issuing debt and lower taxes. So that, I do think that's going to happen, but within this year, I think your phase 2 would be done before any legislation would be put in place. But I do think overall you would think about that. And the second thing is, when you talk about numbers, I've also learned from experience in listening to staff. When they do their contracts, when they lock in their prices, and it was interesting sitting through a couple of these meetings, Steve and Jay talking about bidding out packages, programs, and locking in rates today, and an important consideration, especially when it comes to utility projects. In the last 3 years, I've had more clients of mine fund a program and come back and have to fund more as utility bids came in higher, there were problems with it. It seems there's such an escalation in prices. That's the one thing. So one of the things to take into consideration is not to look at interest rates, to say, can we get can we lock in rate our prices today, and know where you are. And with the thought being, you can actually bid and like I say, I think everyone's going to.
Just keep in mind, Jim, that the committees have been set in the pre-90th legislative session, and this is one of the items that the committees are discussing.
Yeah.
So we probably won't get to the point where we get to the end of the 90th legislative session before decisions are made on this. And that should be one of our considerations. And the thing I'm thinking about is that if our desire is to do these projects, and I'm not advocating for taking down and doing a bond for all of it that we're not going to use at the present time, but there's also the time value of actually being able to do that. Because a very real scenario exists where we would be able to do phase 1, and then we're going to be severely capitated on phase 2.
And a follow-up on that point, when a lot of my clients do utility bonds, listening to them as they discuss the two-phase versus one-phase approach, you also have to understand the nature of the community. And you are vulnerable to a petition on your second process. And I'll tell you, there's a number of my communities that would not take a chance. I represent one community that we faced the dilemma where we've never issued more than a long 7-year debt, which doesn't have to go to a petition.
Right.
Because there's people who petition anything needed, which makes it very difficult. So, some will say, we have a project list, we're going to fund a project list. We don't want to be involved into a petition for any reason. And nowadays, I've seen due to uniqueness that we're facing in our world, people get mad about something else in a petition about it, which just make things difficult. But so the point is that phase 1, phase 2. What it came up to me is that it doesn't matter because they'll come out the same, the interest rates the same. The only thing that would affect it would be interest rates, and that's not something that I'm capable of guiding on. Then scenario 2 you'll see here is just funding one phase of 34 million. If you decide to go forward with that, which may be taken into consideration that you do something that you expect delay the amount of funding to get your grant determination into place.
Yeah, a couple things going on there. One, the 34 million scenario would contemplate not including the shared water tank piece, understanding that that might be handled through a contractual arrangement with the city of Rockwall, and we pay debt service to them. We'll still have debt service. It'll just be in a different form, right? It wouldn't be through our own bond issue. And so that would reduce the amount of proceeds that we would need for this particular debt issue. There is the idea that we're going to pursue grant funding through the Texas Water Development Board WSIG grant program, which you may recall is a one-time grant opportunity. We're engaging Garver to assist us in making that application. That application process has opened up. We are eligible for a city our size to receive up to $15 million. I have no idea whether we would get $15 million or any, and I don't know, Justin, if you could speak to when we would know if we were, once we get our application in, have they set out the rules as to when we would know whether we were awarded?
Sure, the application deadline is July 30th of this year, and they do expect to make a final decision and distribution beginning in the third quarter of this year. So it'll be a 2026 notification.
Right.
One modification based on a recent update is there was an allocation, an unallocated amount of that $1.0 billion that they repurposed under the smaller populations, less than 1,000, and it increased the funding cap per project from 15 to 21 million.
Super.
So
Exciting.
they kept the 21 million the same, but the overall amount under that tranche is still 154 million. So that may mean that they give fewer larger projects out or distribute it a little bit different.
So we're filing for a $21 million grant?
That's an application. We've got to find projects to go against that 21 million.
I'm not sure we have a problem with that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I think the idea was we were going to submit our entire water bridge plan,
Yeah.
if I remember our conversation. So, yeah.
Hey, Jeb, I do have a quick question, and I certainly respect your comment on not trying to time the market. Can you share with us all a little bit the state of the muni market right now? Give me an idea of issuance. Tell me, is it correct or is it false that March of 2026 was the worst muni market since 2022?
Well, I do think that, and again, we saw within that 1 month, 60 basis points up on the 5-year, 35 basis points up on the 20-year. And I think caught a lot of people by surprise. I think caught surprised that we actually went in to Iran like we did, and how much impact this trade was going to have on prices. Intriguingly, before the potential ceasefire, which has already been violated, I believe that we were seeing higher rates. A couple of the things that we had talked about right before they did this was that most countries now are still working within their internal national reserves. Countries they were pulling out reserves, not having to worry about accessing international oil yet. They expected long-term rates, oil and gas prices to continue to spiral upward and affect everything. So, and when this came thing, but there was an unforeseen, and I think unprepared. I know you're involved in the trading market. I think caught a lot of people by surprise. On the other hand, we had big inflows into bond funds. There's been a record inflows in fact the last 6 months or so. But I do think that if you go back, it's interesting. Timing the market is difficult, and I think for projects like this, we have a couple standby economic fundings.
Mm-hmm.
A couple hit their targets, so they'll be in the market tomorrow and hold. That timing is different than something like this. If you got to fund it, you got to fund it prior to signing a contract. State statutes require you to have cash to sign those contracts. But I do think that, and I'd be interested in your opinion. There's more things that can make rates go up happen than rates going down in this world today. I can't tell you where they go, but I think any number of things can happen. We see rates go back up versus coming back down.
No, I agree with that 100%, but my question was, what is the state of the current muni market and how was March?
Well, you know, it's interesting because the high rates, more money's coming in mini markets we've seen in a long time.
But what, I'm talking about deals, deal flow. Is there a lot more supply in the last few months than it's been?
Well,
Because that's going to affect competitive bids, yes or no?
it will.
Yeah.
But I would tell you that until the 27th, when we started, we had record January issuance. You know, as rates start coming down, people had, I think, backed away the market in the fourth quarter. You know, we were busier than we've been in a long time in January. Now it's slowed down. And again, I'll tell you, we haven't sold a bond in 2 weeks. We postponed every sale that could be postponed. And most of those.
So I wasn't the only one that brought that up then. Okay.
The general thought would be, if you needed money, the market could clear it. There's a lot of money on the sidelines to make that happen. And the ones that didn't need money, and when I mean didn't need money, it's not, I don't think, when I talk to my own guidance, we're going to make a 2-week window here, which, you know, you don't need money for 6 months, and you can hold out and see where the market goes. But we've seen a slowdown in transactions, because, again, rates in there are still highs.
So in March, there was not a lot of issuance then? Okay. How about muni performance for the month of March? We were off about 60 basis points from the 7 to the 11 year. And you had made a comment a minute ago about the long-term rates going up. Well, during this last increase, long rates only went up by about 20 basis points.
No, I think
right?
it was interesting because I was looking at, if you take the market today at the end of the day versus the 20-year MMD is only up 9 basis points. We're 43 on the 5. It's all on the front side.
So would that behoove us to change the maturity schedule? Would it behoove, because since about the 5-year to about the 13-year look to have had the most damage over the last 30 days. Here, you can take a look at this if you want to see it.
I'm pretty familiar with it.
Okay.
20-year amortization, and so for me, where I think they would look at is that right now, your cash flow could absorb 20 years based and your performa based on your rate study will allow you to cash flow. And the general thought is that most people try to stay 20 or shorter on their debt and only go longer, and it's just going to cost you more money. I will say that, be as a caveat that, you know, the last 4 years, I've done more 25 and 30-year bond issues, which if I proposed them 15 years ago, I think they were running me out of town. So we saw a lot.
But that's when we were probably in the ZERP bound too, weren't we?
But to me, you know, we can run the analysis, but I don't see a strategic benefit from going longer than 20 years for you. That'd be my perspective. Unless you saw
I don't know. I'm just looking at 60 plus basis points in damage from the 5-year to about the 13. I just didn't know if it would behoove us to change the maturity schedule.
You're right, but we still pay higher interest rates as we go longer.
Okay.
And that's
It's a good point.
I mean, so you know, we're looking at a comparison of yields, but overall, the yields are still going up on that.
One final question. How much more is it going to cost the city to issue now than it did when you first presented? Just from the interest rate move, not for the other costs.
I don't have that off the top of my head, but here's the good news. We're using buffered interest rates right now, and at the highest peak of interest rates, we add a margin. I want to be able to come to Dave Settle to tell Steve and Jay, these are bids, our bids are lower than we talked. So we always build a margin into interest rates. And no time in this process than rates that we show the actual market movement. We've not achieved our initial presentation, but I would think that you're seeing about $2 million more in interest rate right now.
So about $2 million more over the life of the bonds, just from this little increase in interest rates, folks. Yeah. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. Great answers.
Good question, Don.
Going back to it, I think, again, I'd recommend listening to Steve and Jay. What they practically use the plan to implement the process, sign contracts, that's what's the good place. And then the other area where I think we've spent some time, and I'm going to come back to the time frame. This was an update to the paved market, which is approved, but the point for everyone to go through this again, we talked about how, let's say right now, we're at a 10-year equilibrium call, which means, again, just to review this, is that bonds are sold on a 20-year basis, and investors want to know a stated return, so they have no call feature protection. The way it means is that the bonds stay outstanding for 10 years. They can't be pulled away from investors. When investors price them, well, it's 20 years maturity, they generally replace it to the call feature. And so now, if someone who's going to buy a bond issue in the market, they have an amount of profit they want to be involved in for the risk they're taking, and to get that profit, and you want to short your call, then you need to know that the years are shortened, and they can actually make the profit, and so the yield goes up. So we look at about 4 basis points yield going up from 10 to 9 years, 8 basis points when you go to 8 years, 17 when it gets to 7, and 34. And so, again, you can actually negotiate or determine what call feature you want, but if you have a short call, you're going to have less bidders, and the bidders are going to have a higher interest rate. This is going to drive profit from holding bonds for a short period of time. In my general career, I've come to believe that short calls should be more strategically used versus financially. I'll use the best example is we do a lot of developing cities. We have significant, very large debt programs compared to their overall size, and they know they've got big projects coming, and they might have to restructure their balance sheet to absorb the new bond issues. So we might put shorter calls in there, even accepting a higher rate, knowing that they're going to have to adjust some debt service structures to take on a second and third big tranche of things of that nature. When we do revenue projects, sometimes we'll have a short call because we can get, once they stabilize and understand the project's having, we might be able to refund it for permanent capital at a shorter rate, so they'll accept a much higher rate earlier and just get the project done, but then they'll have a lower long-term rate. But for me, for like a AA plus issue like you, we look at your balance sheet, and I didn't bring that with me. I brought that another process, but I think right now we have a number of callable issues.
As Jim's preparing that, Chairman, did your board make a call feature recommendation?
We discussed.
We asked the question.
Yep.
But no recommendation was formalized, because I didn't recall.
I
Mr.
think they were
Alexander.
awaiting, and to my right here is the primary.
Brain trust?
I think what we had found out, at different market cycles, sometimes the call premium, when it's shorter, isn't as wide as it is right now. Is that right, Jim? And right now is not a good time to have short calls.
Right.
And I'm not going to get into trading mechanisms of it, but 10 years will actually, and you don't care what they trade like after you sell them, but there's a better market for 10-year calls, right, Jim?
Yeah, it's standard bid.
Yeah.
There's no exception to that, and I think this will make sense.
Jim, I hate to cut you off, I just want to make sure that I follow. So,
Sure.
So am I hearing from the board that we're probably leaning to, if we're having a call feature,
10-year.
10-year is really the recommendation, right?
That's my recommendation, yes, sir.
Okay, since it hadn't come to us officially, that would then be noted on the record.
And a couple of points. One is that we have about $14 million of debt callable right now. The interest rates were 3 and 4%, but if we had 3 to 4% interest, those are pretty low rates. We refunding right now, we could have saved some money. We've been tracking this. If we issued a refunding bond, match the amortization, we only saved about $370,000. It's about 2.8%. And again, generally in history, Steve and Dale tell you that cities have policies about when they would do a transaction. And this one, we've monitored it for a number of years. It's just never reached a level where you would take action on it. It's kind of a low savings number. And secondly, it gives you a lot of potential. Besides this issue, we have other debt issues coming. In fact, we'll have 80 debt callable by 28. Some more becomes callable in 27, some more comes callable in 28. So you have a lot of flexibility in your balance sheet. That being said, my thought is, I concur with finance, you would sell it at the cheapest rate. And going back to your point, here's how the call feature works. When we hit the all-time lows in interest rates, we could get early calls that, for a while, the real selling equilibrium was 7 to 8 years when we were at the very ultra low, because people thought rates were going to go up. So they really didn't look for much call protection. But when rates are high, just like we want not to pay the interest rate, investors say, why would I take the risk? Give up my interest rate, because if rates go down, they're going to take it away from me. So it's whether you exactly want one, because interest rates, it's going to cost you. But again, I would say that gold, in your case, you're a superior credit. I copy your rating report, strongest credit in the county here. We sell this at, the type of debt you have, I would expect a lot of people will be interested. We don't have a lot of debt outstanding. Heath's a well-known name out there. So, selling a 20 or 10-year call, pretty much level conversation. It's just like eating vanilla ice cream, people bid on it everywhere, I think so.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir.
So, and that's the key points I think we got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Chairman, going back to recommendations, so I'm hearing a call feature. I think we're all in agreement that a call feature's ideal. 10-year makes sense. I believe the original recommendation that came to the council was a $15 million CO.
Yeah, let's talk through that.
Very good.
Yeah, let's get to the meat and potatoes here. So, Mr. Sabonis, I always appreciate his presentations up to a point to where I just get lost in euphoria here. It's unbelievable to me. But one takeaway at my level that I've always understood and always appreciate, and he said it again tonight, is that in his 30-plus years of doing this, that his recommendation to his communities is to issue debt when you need the money and not to chase interest rates, right? And I think that, good, bad, or indifferent, I think that that's about as sound of advice as we should receive as a body. To that end, in my efforts of trying to best represent the general takeaway from this board in the form of a recommendation to the council, I'm going to start by saying that it has not been anti-water bridge plan or $40.5 million in expenses. It was brought in the form of a charge to us as to how to best provide an opinion of when and how this debt is issued and how it would be issued. And more specifically, whether it be done in 1 tranche, 2 tranche, 10 tranches, what may have you. As a very general statement, I think that what fueled the reservation of the full 40.5 for what sounds to be kind of a rush time for this meeting to ultimately happen. I think there's an April 14th date or something like that of significance forthcoming, maybe at your next council meeting without me looking, was simply the fact that when we asked when these particular projects that comprise the $40.5 million were going to be done and or when the money was going to be needed for them, the majority of it was going to be in 2 or 3 plus additional fiscal years, fiscal budgets going forward, not now. And before we talk about all things obvious, if you got to have the money before you make commitments to go do that, that was always a strong point, and there was no misunderstanding from the board in those regards, which if it's 15 million, you've referred to a couple of times, Mayor, if that's what my email said, I don't remember the exact number. I can tell you that the intent behind it was to fund the reimbursement of $1 million, to fund all things above and underground storage, and to finish funding the already agreed to design mechanisms for the next round of wells. And pure memory purposes, that was somewhere in the $15 to $17 million range. It was then brought to the attention that there was seemingly favorable odds for us to be successful in potentially getting as much as $15 million from a grant opportunity from the state. It sounds like that may have increased to 21. That's a good problem versus the alternative. That kind of fueled even more of the fire per se of hang tight, go back to the recommendation of Mr. Sabonis of fund projects when you need the money, which put more emphasis on the next calendar year and the next budget to go do this in the timing of when the respective funds would be needed. We then broke down to Mr. Alexander's best, not guess, but just based off the knowledge and the information that he had at the time of when the estimated projects would be started for the respective wells 2 through 4. And that then triggered the conversation of there being a potential economies to scale from your contractor of packaging these together. We then asked the obvious next question of what type of savings are we talking about to compare it to the amount of additional expenses and interest that you're going to be incurring for funding projects well in advance of what's being needed. And so as a result of that, the really short list in the form of an actual formal recommendation was really shortened to be borrow money in the calendar year that you're going to need it in, not all in advance, and in the process reduce this significant burden of the rates that we've taken on in advance of borrowing the money for same. Now, I know earlier we had talked about, there was a slide that showed 24%, followed by 16.3 and 2.2, and I think, to the best of my recollection, that it was somewhere ultimately landed once we broke out phase 1 and phase 2 at a 24 or 25% for the next 4 years of increasing these rates, when in reality, we're going to be taking some 5, 6, 7, 8 years to put this water bridge plan into fruition. And so I think if we attempt to put all things politics on the side for a minute, and we just strictly talk about what's in our purview and what's been presented in front of us as to how to best spend the ultimate $62 or so million in the timing of same, it's not a phase 1 and phase 2, it's however many phases it takes from budget years or calendar years to do this, as the takeaway. And that radically softens an extraordinary rate hike that's been put in place in advance of it. So if I've spoken out of place, or if anybody else wants to add or subtract any of that, please do. I was trying to generalize the summary of our kind of final takeaway, if you will, from our last meeting.
No, Chairman, my only concern, I guess, was I was not aware that we had recommended a $15 million bond issue to them.
Well, the 15 was really an attempt of providing a conclusive summary of above ground, underground storage, engineering commitments that we already have, reimbursing what's already been taken, which is $1 million from other funds to be reimbursed into this. And to the best of my memory, that was somewhere in the $15 to $17 million range.
Again, I apologize, I was not aware that went to council.
Yeah, I think the recommendation from the chair, I think Jay worked with the chair, vice chair, on the recommendation from the finance board, was a $14 million bond issue to cover the elevated storage tanks, and I think it said ground storage as well, but I'm not have to go back and look at it. But that was read to the city council. They were made aware of that recommendation, and so that.
And just to make sure that we're following all the numbers, we're 8 million in right now, right? With the well 1,
which was a part of the previous, right?
Yeah.
Part of the previous 2023. Well 1 was part of the park and DPS, the $30 million.
No, that money.
No.
Independent.
It's what?
It's independent from that.
So is it, so on our summary here of the $40 million projects, it's water wells 2 through 4, and only a $1 million reimbursement for well number 1.
Yes.
So as part of the consideration of the $62 million or $62.5 million, well 1, outside of the $1 million reimbursement, to my knowledge, has never been contemplated in this issuance. Is that right?
Not in the issuance. It would not, again, the plan was to fund the engineering design from existing resources. $4.5 million of the construction cost for well number 1 through existing resources, and $1 million coming through phase 1 of the bond issue.
Okay, fair enough, and certainly not trying to hijack the $8 million summary here, but page 2 of our packet that has a $39.697 million, I'm calling that 40, okay, that ultimately is the 40.5. The only thing referenced for well number 1 on here is a reimbursement of $1 million.
That's right.
Okay, so
we're
not mixing apples and oranges of
We're just
there's
trying
8 million and 5 of that being.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to make sure that everybody understands that it's all still real money, right? So as we start looking at reserves that we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, is what are we into it for? But now we're starting to split it to start talking about bond issuance and designations. They're not one and the same, but they are still part of our funds.
I'll be the first to admit, I don't think that we've really been presented any of that. We've just been asked and tasked to look at the 62 or whatever it is here. So, you know, I don't think it's necessary, frankly, for us to get into our opinions of there being 5,500 more people coming in, and whether it's 5 wells versus 6 wells. That's up to the council. That's the governing body that's going to make these decisions. We strictly have taken what's been brought to us as to how we best recommend the ultimate issuance of $62.5 million, and when it got right down to it, it's why in the world are we issuing all this money now when we already know in advance it's not going to be for a few more years that we actually need it. And the comment that I made that is of zero stab, it's certainly not directed to the mayor or any particular member of the council, short of there being a takeaway from what some of or all of you may believe to be a charge from the citizens to go fix this water problem. Great. But fixing something that's 12 to 15 years out and paying for it when it's paying for it now when it's going to take 12 to 15 years before we need it all. I think the general takeaway from this board is that that's what really needs to be considered and reconsidered.
Very well, thank you, Chairman. Did I have a question? I thought I heard somebody speak. So when you're mentioning 8 years to construct, Mr. Alexander, could you speak to that?
Yeah, and we've had this conversation. You know, the timelines we've talked about to bid out and award these projects is going to be happening over the next 6 to 8 months. And so I can't recommend to the council to enter into a contract for a $14 million water well or a $12 million elevated storage tank if we don't have resources to back the contract. Just like if I have wells 2 through 4 and we consolidate those into a single bid, or we split it between 2 and we bid that out, and it's $22 million of water wells that we bid out, I can't recommend to council to enter into agreements to build those things if we don't have the resources to back the construction of that project. You know, Mr. Chairman, you're right. The construction process for these projects takes a year and a half to get done, but we have to enter into those contracts, which we'll be financially committed to pay for at a much earlier date.
If you did them all at the same time.
Which has been the charge from the city council to cities.
Understood. And so the second phase of that, I believe, and when we look at option 2 that was taken, the $40.5 million now as phase 1, $21.5 million in phase 2, It's been discussed a couple of times tonight in the presentations that if all goes as scheduled or planned or what may have you, that as soon as, whatever, the next council meeting or whatnot, that you move forward with all 40.5, that, oh, well, we're gonna move right into phase 2 approximately 12 months from now.
Assumably, it's
Fair, right? And so I'm just sitting here going, time out. We're years away from even conceivably being through a 2 through 4, and we're already talking about a potential phase 2 of that 12 months. It's not 12 months from now. It's much, much farther out from that. And so I just think for the benefit of the public, for the benefit of this board attempting to communicate this clearly, we're compressing this in there. And if there's motive or motivation that I'm referring to as whether it's political or whatever, maybe it's reservation or concerns that another administration or governing body in the future comes in and says, that's great, I'm glad they put all this work in here, we don't like that. If that's it, then let's put that on the record and discuss that that's what this is actually about. But from a monetary perspective and the need of the funds, we don't need these funds right now, all of them. We've talked, certainly in part, we can try not to repeat myself, but the underground, the above ground, the storage, that's all that needed right now.
But Chairman, you're referencing this all when this is not all carte blanche, right? We're talking about phase 1, phase 2. We're fairly arbitrary in when that phase 2 needs to hit, right? Right now, we're trying to address phase 1. We're saying, hey, in a 12-month cycle, this needs to come back. We need to figure this part out. But right now, we're looking at phase 1 and trying to address wells 2 through 4 and the raised storage tank, right? We've got the new well online coming in 2027. So ultimately, that's why there's 2 separate phases.
Totally.
So even though we're saying phase 2, we're going to talk about it in 12 months. We're not committing that in this next, when the council votes.
Got it. And the bus driver of the reservation of phase 1 in its fullest capacity was the answer to the question when we asked, when are these wells 2 through 4 intended to be performed? It was described as, it was explained to us that they would be done one at a time, that they take approximately a year. There's 3 years.
Mr. Chairman, we discussed with the finance board, excuse me?
Oh, right, am I wrong, guys? I don't care
Well,
what
the
that
phase
Gantt chart
one,
says, I'm talking
we're
about
in
the answer that we
26,
were given.
I read off a page what the award dates we were planning would be, and that was in 2026.
Award dates.
Mr. Chairman.
If we award them all at the same, right, no, I get you, we're mixing apples and oranges. I totally get what you're saying. If we do all 3, if we award them all 3, and we do all that, then you gotta be funded all at once.
Okay.
Noted.
Thank you, Mr.
Got
Thank
it, and that's exactly what you delivered. We expanded on that and said, what is the realistic schedule of installation of doing this? I know what that chart says. It's what you read to us, and it's what you've repeated to us. I got it.
Well, I can tell you it's 4 months if you were to use your current well as your benchmark.
Benchmark.
Yeah, so it's a 4 months. So if they're in engineering now, once you're out of engineering, obviously taking the bond cycle out of it, funding, taking the bid process out, you're talking about 4-month cycle for drill, assuming that it goes well. And we did have a few issues where we had to fish out bits. So it
Sure.
did not run perfectly.
Sure.
But it was a
3,300
successful
feet
one.
in the ground, something's
Yeah.
gonna go wrong.
Yeah, 34.
34.
34, we came back up to 32, so yeah. So in that scenario, and we have talked, and I can't speak to y'all's finance meetings, but we have talked amongst the council is, hey, if we can get economies of scale, great, that's ideal, right, for pricing. Number 2 is that if we can find a driller that has the capabilities and capacity to do them simultaneously, perfect. If they need to mobilize one unit, go 4 months, move the unit, go another 4 months, another 4 months, you're still solving the problems in 2029. And that ultimately is the goal of that phase 1. And I will also tell you too, not that this really should bear any of the conversation, but I just think it's important to know that the raised storage tank has been on the CIP for a number of years in Heath Golf and Yacht, and it will help dramatically with pressure in the southern corridor of the city.
Totally agree. Can't get the additional storage on fast enough.
Can I make one comment,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman and Mayor? With what we've heard tonight about the potential for COs to be going away in the next Congress, Jim, I think you kind of confirmed that. You know, COs were originally formed for emergency issues. Right? Issuers have kind of taken advantage of it over the last 20, 30 years.
I think there was a reason why we put COs out, and I would put, the way I describe it to a client is it a normal course of business for you to do it? Do you have to, and here's an example here, you're trying to do water capacity, do you want to put that to vote? Yeah, I'll tell you, my brother lives here, he votes against it because it's how he votes for everything, so.
Yeah.
So there's some things, it's a decision, I think, for our council saying, we have to do this for the good of the community.
Oh, absolutely, and I agree, because I've been in communities where you've had to issue GOs, they've been voted down, you've had to fight about it for a couple of cycles.
So I wouldn't think that, they were created for a purpose, for things that are common.
Yeah.
And my point I would tell clients is that what I see is different. Here's a good example, you know, COs will put you this, do you want to put stuff forward, do you want to go through the timing, also about overlapping political issues, and also recognize that you get defeated, can't go back into the
Right.
market for a number of years. And yet, at the same time, you know, that this is something that's well planned out and thoughtful, you know, we're building a sports stadium.
Yeah, it's a different story. Yeah.
Something of that nature should be built.
So, with that said, we have a risk now that these COs could go away. So if we loaded everything up front and got them issued, Mr. Chairman, that risk goes away. The other thing, and Jim brought up a good point, and again, I'm just checking everybody on the move in interest rates, right? But if this war continues to go on, rates could go higher.
Yeah.
If we have a lot of inflation, rates could go higher. You know, I'm the first one that I think Trump's the only man that can end this war, right? But who knows if that happens. So we've taken, if we issue sooner rather than later, and if we issue, Chairman, in 1 or 2 tranches versus 4 or 5, we take an element of interest rate risk out of it because we know what the debt issuance is going to cost us right now. Those debt proceeds, although they won't be used maybe for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, we've been talking also with this committee about putting together an investment program. These bond funds can be reinvested back into government securities.
That's a good point, Don.
Right? So that reduces the cost, which I think is what we're all trying to save here. Right, Chairman?
No, I think that's right. I think at the end of the day, with no need to belabor, is we're strictly trying to give the best recommendation of not spending money unnecessarily in via receipt of unnecessary or unused, not unnecessary, funds that are not going to be used, that you're going to be paying full freight on. At the end of the day, that's what, that's the deal.
And that's a great point, but you saw what a 60 basis point increase cost, the increase of issuance, $2 million, folks. What if rates go up 300 basis points?
One of the things that got me is we attempted to break the issuance down again was 1A, 1B was the fixed cost, the transactions cost that may again incur. So that begins to whittle away any advantage of trying to match those inflows, outflows, especially given the investment income Don referenced.
Well, I don't need to say this, but I will. This is exactly why you're here.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so I do appreciate the devil's advocate approach of giving another point. I will tell you too that as we talk about risk, there are other unknown risks.
Absolutely.
Mayor Pro Tem spoke of one. We also have right of capture. It's a minimal risk. Right of capture is a 120-year law, but at any given time, right, if there are concerns at the state level and then they decide to take right to capture away, we're not even going to be talking about wells anymore, okay? So let's keep some of that into perspective. I would also point out that construction costs, I have not seen construction costs go down. So as much as we're trying to play, you know, the rate crystal ball, we also have to understand that construction costs could easily offset that $2 million number that we're talking about in waiting.
We saw that, Mr. Mayor. We saw that in 18 months. The
We did.
price of the wells went up $4 million per well.
We did. The prices in which, when Mayor Pro Tem and Councilman Mormon and I first got here, we started talking about wells. The prices that we were hearing were 2.5, maybe 3. And then when we got our first bid, I believe it was 9. So again, there's risk all over this, right? And not a one of us have a crystal ball, but I do appreciate you guys teasing this out.
I
'cause that's
failed
why
to
we're here.
include, where the 15 number came from, because it's around $17 million worth
Right.
of projects, of commitments at present.
Right.
That was because we had received the financial report from CPA tonight, within days of y'all getting the same thing, that had pointed out our fund balance was in the 58% range, and it had freed somewhere between $2 and $3 million of excess fund balance that could be used to go towards that. And so that was how we went from the 17 down to the 15, and I think that's still being taken a deeper dive and closer look. And this slide right here kind of highlighted that even more so earlier when that was being presented. So I think that the general takeaway is if the council deems its necessity to do it all now with the sound reason of we have to do it for all things obvious, for timing, great. It sure wasn't received that way on our side, that it needed to be done in this next budget year, okay? Emphasis of really taking a deep dive. We weren't a part of y'all's budget cycle last year. This was just being formed, if you recall. It was kind of 2/3 of the way through all things budget cycle, so there wasn't really any formal recommendations from this board to influence that. I think most people know that I was very actively involved in all things CIP 10 years ago when I had the fortune of sitting in y'all's shoes, and our target was in the 25 to 30 to 35% fund balance range. And so when we saw 58 here, it was an exaggerated highlight that really needs to be taken a much deeper dive into to see how you can ultimately apply this towards both general fund as well as utility fund size to take advantage of those. And then another item of note here is, and y'all have it buried in your monthly financial reports that you get, make no mistake that we still have a few million here and a few 100,000 here and a few million there of the 2017 issuance bonds. I know it was fun to put in the newsletter a couple months ago how much of a savings you had on the expansion of Hubbard Drive. That Hubbard Drive was 2.5 times what it was going to cost when we originally let the bonds out in 2017.
It sure was, Chairman. Thank you for pointing that out.
Great job on maneuvering some money. But
You ought to look at the damn county roads, Brian.
yeah, but the good part is you were able to go back and you're doing exactly what we're talking about here, of acknowledging and recognizing that there are these previous issuances. I believe it was in 2013, 2017, most recently in 2023, that generally speaking, and it's a good problem, that there was contingencies like good practice would measure in all these issuances that didn't have to be touched and dug into, right? Well, when you take that over the course of the last 13 years here, there's a fair amount of excess here. So I think as a general takeaway, it was before we go sign the dotted line of the formal issues, let's ensure that we're capturing all known savings accordingly.
I think that's good counsel.
Yep,
Brian.
I would agree, and then just to point out too, again, the reason that we even considered 2 phases is because of this body that sits before us today. The reason in which you see us sharpening our pencil and really deep diving commitments, etc., is because of this body that sits before us today. So understanding the future state of potentially $8 million of exposure that's down there where you don't see allocated funds, that too is sitting here before you today because of this body, and that body being you. Thank you, Chairman.
I think Don had a terrific point with regards, should we make the decision to move forward with phase one on the investment of the unused portion of those bonds into some return vehicle to lessen the gap.
Well, what's interesting, Mr. Pro Tem, is surprisingly, frankly, the investment funds that we have as a general rule of thumb here are hovering in the 4 to 4.5% return rate. That's pretty impressive for a relatively small governing body here. So, you know, if there's opportunities for that to be strengthened, you know,
And there are.
short of taking immeasurable risk, obviously.
Right.
I mean, we can all go find ways to make more money.
But the Public Fund Investment Act tells us what we can do and what we can't do.
Yes.
You know, the issue with the city's investment program, now not an issue, something that can be improved, is that everything is in overnight funds, right? So we're subject to the short end of the yield curve, to the Fed funds rate, basically. Had we gone in...
That too is why you're sitting here today, thank you.
Had we gone, and again, no, I'm not blaming anybody, right, Brian? We're just here trying to make things better. And Jay and I've had a short communication with your firm, with Hilltop Securities Asset Management.
Yeah.
Hilltop does a great job at managing investment portfolios for cities, counties, school districts, public entities. If we would have had a program where we could have set some of these funds out to commercial paper, discount notes, treasury bills, something like that, 1 to 2 years, we would have $1 million more, so between $750 and $1 million more this year than we did last year in investment income.
That's material.
And it is, it's real money.
Yeah.
And again, we're not a young city, but a small growing city. We've got time to put these in place. Right, Chairman?
We do, and I would tell you, just for the benefit of the council, is we're even looking at our existing banking relationships and not necessarily with the energy of making recommendations to change per se, as much as looking at our ADBs and seeing that, sure, we need to have, you know, 90 to 180 days of immediate go-to, and certainly not trying to look at tying things up in 12 and 24 month, just generally funds, whether independent of what type of funds we're talking about. But I think that you're going to see a recommendation forthcoming in your next budget cycle that generates a revenue, another revenue source for same that's favorable just by better managing
the cash
that you have at present.
I agree.
So,
You know, we've done that, or I've done that with NGOs as well, that have healthy fund balances, and the benefit that they inure from that is material every single time. And clearly that's exacerbated here with the fund balances that we're currently sitting on.
well,
All right, very well. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Am I hearing that we are in some alignment of phase one as presented? Phase two is still into a future state of reevaluation. We're going to say 12 months from now, but again, it's a reevaluation period. But what I'm hearing today is that the new recommendation from the body is that phase one as presented, as well as a 10-year call being the recommendation.
That is mine.
That's mine. Good here.
I think what we're gonna know in the third quarter.
Very well.
If the grant comes through, is phase two even necessary to take down and
Sure,
consider?
that's right.
That's right.
Right?
It's a very valid point.
That's a massive benefit. No pressure, get that money.
Can you handicap it at all? Is it a total wild card, or is there a strong opportunity for this?
I can't answer that.
Okay.
Justin, do you have
Yeah,
any?
I think the two criteria that they published is, one is the ratio of the average median household income. So they take the 5-year state average, you divide by your actual service area's average, and multiply by 10, that's the number that you have for that. The other is your shovel readiness. So you get 10 bonus points if the project is approved by TCEQ and ready for construction.
Very well, thank you, sir. With that being said, Mr. Alexander, any further thoughts?
No, sir. I appreciate everybody's time and energy on this. I know, and really appreciate the Finance Board for your help in guiding staff and providing leadership in this area as well as the City Council. Thank you.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Alexander. Councilman Myers?
I'm good.
Councilman Mormon?
I do not have a hand up.
Can't take any public comments at this time.
I wasn't gonna ramble now.
Councilman Thurgood?
It was very informative. I learned a whole lot. I guess I had a little, like, do we want to consider a pros and cons list of borrowing and spending all of the money in 2027? As was mentioned by the Finance Board, is that an important element to consider, or are we comfortable moving forward?
I believe that we've heard tonight that we're comfortable, this body's comfortable with this phase one as presented at 41 million with a call at 10-year.
Okay, well, I am too then.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem.
No further questions, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman
I saw a
Norman.
hand up. Mr. Sabonis, do you have any other comments?
Purely just a simple administrative fact that when we actually, when you schedule this meeting, we postpone the sale until the council meeting on the 14th, but making a decision today and submitting the documents into the competitive process down in time. So
We're going to need to postpone.
Postpone,
Yeah.
minimum to the next council meeting.
I appreciate you reminding me of that topic, but going into this meeting, we knew that there was a need to postpone, and thank you guys for taking the time to do that.
This has to be posted, right, Mayor? Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. If there are no further comments, anyone from the board have any comments? I can't say it enough. As I started this meeting, thank you for everything, being a taxpayer and being a volunteer, and giving us your time is so greatly appreciated. At this time, we will adjourn this work session at 7:46. Thank you.
And I'm gonna go tell my wife, she doesn't have to
I'm not public.
spare the water anymore after this is done.